Greetings, everybody. This is Donna Quesada, or you can call me Don Paul as well. That's my spiritual name. I wrote a collection of stories, little mini stories, meant to introduce Buddhism. And I was asked to make a video about these, and I'm happy to do so. They're not the most uplifting of stories, but I think that they serve the purpose of conveying what Buddha meant by dukkha and by suffering. And when I tell these stories, I would like you to sort of think what they all have in common, and then we'll find out at the end how they serve as a way of demonstrating what Buddha meant by suffering, but also how he wishes to point us out of suffering. That's the part many people forget, that what Buddha really wanted was to give us a way to liberate ourselves. And so with that in mind, I'm going to tell these short stories. Feel free to just close your eyes and listen, and then we'll talk about them afterward. Okay, so they're called the 10 Houses of Suffering. Now imagine you're walking down the street, and it's a middle-class, nice neighborhood, and you see this string of nice houses on a block. They're all pretty well taken care of, except the last house, which needs some work. Inside the first house is a man who suspects his wife is sleeping with somebody else. He spends every minute of every day in a state of paranoid suspicion. Right now, he's listening to her phone conversation, creeping along, crouching under the row of expensive paintings in the long corridor. He hopes the floor doesn't crack with his sneaky footsteps, giving him away, betraying his jealousy. Inside the second house is a 25-year-old woman with an eating disorder. At least 5 days of every week are spent alternately binging and purging, and taking no pleasure from the compulsive acts. Her throat, her teeth, and her stomach are destroyed, and she lives with the fact that she's killing herself and she can't stop. The other 2 days are spent in isolation, hunger, and self-hatred. Inside the third house is a mother too afraid to answer the phone, yet simultaneously too afraid to stray too far from the house, because her son is off in Iraq, and news of her only son's status might be delivered at any moment. Inside the fourth house is a 33-year-old aging cover model, losing jobs to 18-year-olds. She curses at her own face in the mirror and doesn't have any more will to get out of bed in the morning. She owes $20,000 in debt from lost pay, yet she just accepted one more credit card offer to schedule plastic surgery on her neck and her eyes, in the hope that it will make her better and that it will make her like herself better. Inside the fifth house is a heroin addict. He's missing out on his children's young years, but can't stop. Making it worse is his wife, who calls him a loser, taunting him daily for his weakness. Every time he tries to give it up for good, he gets violently ill and gives in to the urge to shoot up again, even though he knows it's only a temporary pleasure. It's gotten to the point where he stands to lose his job, his wife, and the house. He no longer enjoys being sober because of the agonizing guilt that eats him alive. Inside the sixth house is a 60-year-old woman who's just been diagnosed with incurable cancer. She knows her body will soon start to break down, and that she will soon have to face her own death. She will have to come to grips with the fact that she will never see her grandchildren, her husband, or her dogs again. Inside the seventh house is an 85-year-old woman who lost her husband 5 years ago. Having lost her will to live, she lies in bed all day long, surrounded by the dusty antique knickknacks she spent her life collecting. Her Social Security checks go entirely to the illegal caretakers, paid to help her go to the bathroom and take her to the doctor. She refuses to leave her home and go to an elderly home, and she can't bear to sell her things. Inside the 8th house is a 19-year-old boy with agoraphobia. Stepping outside of the house is like hanging off a bridge, sweaty fingers slipping, no one to catch you. He takes his Xanax and sits in front of his computer, wearing the mask of his artificial identity, chatting in forums, witty and sarcastic on screen, but hating himself all the while on the inside because he's lonely and bored and it never goes away. Inside the 9th house is a 30-year-old ambitious office worker who just missed out on a promotion due to the fact that his scheming female colleague in the next cubicle claimed his idea as her own, taking all the credit and the rewards. He takes his seething hatred out on other women in the form of abusive relationships that leave him feeling more empty and worthless rather than respectable and valued. Inside the 10th house, the smallest house on the block, is a newlywed couple who bought this fixer-upper because it was the only house they could afford, given their loan qualifications. Because their house is at the end of the street, they're forced to drive past the other, more glorious houses every day, going to and from work. He imagines his neighbors' luxurious lives, Saturday barbecues and big screen TVs, and she is filled with increasing bitterness toward him for promising a new kitchen and plumbing that works, bathrooms that she can decorate in coordinated colors, just like in the magazines. Yet the months go by, and still her husband has done nothing to improve their house, and their relationship is quickly turning bitter. My question to you, my listeners, is firstly, does the suffering of these people who live inside these 10 houses have anything in common? What is the nature of their suffering? Is it the same in any way? Are we connected in the way that we are suffering? I wrote these stories to raise these questions and also to show that yes, we are connected in the way that we suffer. We're all like the people that live in these 10 houses. In fact, when I use these stories to introduce Buddhism, I like to remind my students that Buddha existed 2,500 years ago, and so the tendency might be to ask what these stories have to do with Buddha's era. We're all very much the same. It's all human nature. In Buddha's day, we didn't have big screen TVs and magazines with Bed Bath & Beyond advertisements and things like that. We didn't have plastic surgery to keep us looking young forever. But it doesn't matter. Human nature is human nature, and that's what I want to pose to you all. Let's go underneath all of those trivial facts that we didn't have iPods, we didn't have technology, but we all were attached to something. And that was Buddha's point. What is it that we're attached to, all in our own individual ways? Before I answer that question, I want to remind you of what Buddha was exposed to quite on accident when, as a curious youngster, he snuck out of the house, like any overprotected teenager, and he was exposed to all of the ills of society. Or I should say, all of the inevitables. He was exposed to death. He was exposed to illness. He was exposed to old age. But he was also exposed to the wandering holy men that you still see wandering in India, looking for enlightenment, having achieved a modicum of inner peace. The sadhus, we call them. And basically what he said was, I'll have what they're having. He said they look so peaceful, despite the inevitables, despite the fact that we're all going to grow old. We're all going to suffer from various kinds of illnesses, from broken hearts and everything in between, from the trivial to the serious. And the sadhus seem to be at peace with it all. And Buddha resolved, well, of course he wasn't Buddha at the time, he was Siddhartha. He was a prince, but he was curious, and he was contemplative, and he was resolved to find the answers. And so he went and planted himself under the tree, and he meditated. And it doesn't matter how long he meditated for, if it was 1 year or 3 years or 6 years or 49 days, that doesn't matter. He wanted to solve the riddle. He wanted to solve the puzzle. Why do we suffer? Yes, certain things are inevitable. Pain is inevitable. But as the saying goes, the suffering is optional. What is it that helps us turn the key? That helps us, like the sadhu, find inner peace despite it all? And what dawned on him was that we do it to ourselves. In fact, when we look at these stories, these 10 houses of suffering that I wrote to convey this point, what he realized was that it's all self-inflicted. We all do it to ourselves because we're clinging onto some ideal. We're clinging onto the impossible. We're stuck wishing that things were other than how they really are. And because we're stuck wishing that things were other than they are, it prevents us from living in a state of acceptance with the fluctuation of life and all of its ups and downs, all of its natural variations, complete with, you guessed it, pleasure and pain, youth and old age, things that feel good, things that don't feel so good, things that we'd prefer and things that we don't quite prefer. If we could only see clearly that reality includes all of these things that we like and that we don't like, then we could be okay with it all. We could live in a state of acceptance. And we wouldn't shoot ourselves in the foot trying to have what we can't have, trying to make reality be other than it really is. And so that is really the answer to that question that I posed. What do all of these people who live in these 10 houses, these fictional houses, well, they're fictional, but you know the greatest truths come in the form of fiction. What do they all have in common? All of their suffering is very individual, and yet it's the same. It's the same in that it's all self-inflicted. And we all do it, and we all did it back in Buddha's day as well. That is what Buddha meant by dukkha. And that is the first noble truth. These are the teachings that Buddha first delivered, called the Four Noble Truths, and this is the first. The first is simply the statement that life is suffering, that things just aren't quite right. We just have this feeling of discontent, angst, something isn't right. We would like things to be other than they are. We're not quite content with the way things are. And so I want to go over there, because over there things seem better. You know, the grass is always greener. You know, things will be better when I get a new job, or when I retire, or when I get a new husband, or when I graduate if I'm a student, or when I get that new pair of shoes, or when I finally make enough money, or when I'm able to, like the model in that house, when that model gets the plastic surgery and she's finally pretty and then she gets the gig and things are better. When we get recognized for the job we did, when we finally get our book published, when, as an actor, we get that role we've been coveting. There's always a condition that we place on our happiness, and we think that when that condition is fulfilled, when X, then Y, then I'll be happy. That's dukkha. That's what Buddha meant by suffering. It's a very subtle kind of suffering. We always think it's the more obvious forms, and it might be that as well. But it's that subtle kind of angst, that deep-seated feeling that when I get that thing, that recognition, that write-up, that new whatever it is, when I finally own my own house, when I get the new car, then I'll be happy. That's suffering. And he wrote it out like a doctor's prescription. That's the description of what it is. Just as a doctor first diagnoses, he first says what it is and explains what is the case? Now we can go on with a better explanation and we can solve it. We can write a prescription. What causes it? How did I get myself into this? Why do I do this to myself? Well, he explained that too. The reason is that I get attached to the ideas that I have in my mind. And that attachment, he called Trishna. Clinging. I like to call it controlling. Clinging, attachment, controlling, trying to make reality be the way I have it pictured in my head, trying to make reality conform, trying to impose my expectations on reality and on others, trying to make others do what I think they should do, trying to make reality be the way I think it should be. But of course, this is impossible. My clear seeing that reality includes all of it will help me let go. And that he called nirvana, letting go. And this is an example of how that quality of impermanence, the truth of impermanence, permeates his teachings. Buddha said life is impermanent, and you are impermanent too. What that means is that pleasure won't last forever. And when I truly, truly see this and understand it in my heart, then I won't go out clutching to try to have it be a permanent case. I won't go out reaching for things on the outside that give me pleasure, because I will understand that it doesn't last, and it's not a true source of lasting joy. That's not what happiness is all about. Happiness and pleasure aren't the same thing. And when I go out trying to seek things that give me pleasure, food, drugs, a new pair of shoes, even youth, when I go out seeking these things, as if it could bring me happiness, I end up disappointed time and time again. That's the shadow side. That's the constant, chronic disappointment that follows from my lack of clear seeing, my confusion with regard to what I really want and what will bring me happiness. I stop mixing up pleasure and happiness. I stop confusing short-term pleasure with that permanent sense of inner joy. And I stop looking for it in all the wrong places, because I truly understand that pleasure doesn't last forever. Nothing on the outside does. And then I stop shooting myself in the foot by buying things or trying to have things that don't last. The good news is, pain doesn't last forever either. Life is impermanent means just that. Impermanence means pain doesn't last forever either. And so I can relax with the bad times, the quote-unquote bad times. Maybe I don't even define it like that anymore. It just is. It's just all part of the waxing and waning of life, the high tide and the low tide, the yin and the yang. I let it all be. I let it all wash in and wash out again, knowing that it comes and it goes. Everything comes and it goes. Pleasures come and go. Pain also comes and goes. And I'm able to relax with all of it. My attachments start to relax. And I live with what is, letting the hard times come and go, and letting the pleasures come and go, and taking it all in stride. And I stop trying to control reality. I stop trying to make it be what I think it should be. I stop trying to force others to do what I think they should do. And further, I get out of this pattern of acquiring and blocking, trying to acquire things to fulfill those pleasures. Buying, having, looking for money, looking for fame, or like the model in the story, looking for eternal youth. Even like the woman who is diagnosed in cancer, knowing that even death is an option, and it's going to come at some time. And so I might be able to accept even that a little bit easier and enter into the state of presence where I can enjoy every moment of my life with a gracefulness about it, rather than getting stuck in some idea of the impossible. I can let go even of life itself with a little bit more grace and acceptance. I can let go of that sense of trying to acquire. I can let go of trying to block. We all get into that condition of trying to numb out what doesn't feel good. numbing, distracting in the form of drugs or food, or even endless love affairs that only keep us numb from this present moment. I'd stop trying to find happiness in short-term pleasures, knowing that it only brings more suffering. It only perpetuates what Buddha called dukkha. I'd get out of this cycle of longing and loathing, the picking and choosing mind, trying to have this and push that away, acquiring what I like and blocking what I don't like. It only perpetuates more suffering. And what I want to do is liberate myself from that. And so, in asking the question, what does this all have to do with meditation? That's what the monks are doing on their cushion, because it's a journey into now. Happiness and sadness and everything in between. And coming to that state where I can accept it all. Because as I sit, I'm entering into my journey, into acceptance, into the here and now. I come to understand that trying to squelch what is, trying to push away what I don't like, only intensifies it. The resistance only intensifies my own bondage. It's kind of like that frog game at the carnivals, where you hit the plastic frog down and another one just comes popping up, and it's an everlasting, endless cycle of trying to push away what only comes popping up, and I can't do it. But as I sit and as I relax into this moment, I come to accept what this moment brings. Every time I breathe into it, I practice letting go. That's nirvana, the third noble truth. Every time I take a nice deep breath and I let it out again, I practice letting go and accepting what is. I practice letting the wave come and letting it wash away again. Even my own thoughts can come and they go, and they come and they go. And every time I do that, every moment I do that, every moment I relax into this present moment, I get a little bit stronger on the inside and better able to take that practice out into the real world, where come what may, I can breathe into it, I can accept it, and I can adapt to it, and I can let go my own tendency to resist it and simultaneously to attach to my idea of how I wish things would be, because we know that really doesn't work. Try as I might, it never works. And so those are the three noble truths: dukkha, trishna, attachment, and nirvana, letting go. The fourth noble truth is the practice of doing it, and that comes in 8 parts. Maybe we'll do that in another series one day. For now, I sign off with all of my warm greetings, and I look forward to seeing you again.